remember thinking the world owed me an apology that day. Not because I was cruel. Not because I was arrogant. But because everything in my life had always worked the way it was supposed to, until that afternoon. The sun was too bright. The road was too quiet. And my brand new Mercedes, the one I had waited months for, the one I had posted about twice before even driving it properly, just stopped. No warning. No drama. Just silence. I stood beside it, arms crossed, pink hair catching the light, my reflection staring back at me from the glossy black paint. Designer leggings, expensive bag, perfect makeup. I looked like I belonged in a commercial, not stranded on the side of a road. I sighed and checked my phone again. No signal. Of course. When I finally heard the sound of an engine approaching, relief washed over me, and then quickly turned into something else. The tow truck wasn't sleek. It wasn't impressive. And the man who stepped out of it didn't fit the image in my head. His boots were worn. His jacket faded. His hands already marked by grease and work. He moved slowly, deliberately, like someone who didn't need to rush to prove anything. I noticed his skin before anything else. Black. Warm. Strong. And I hate admitting this now, but back then, I judged him instantly. I laughed under my breath, not even realizing how sharp it sounded. So, I said, tilting my head. "You're the mechanic?" He looked at me, nodded once. Engine died. His voice was calm. Low. Steady. Something about it unsettled me. "Yeah," I replied. "Fix it if you can." I don't know why I said what came next. Maybe nerves. Maybe ego. Maybe the need to feel in control. I smiled. The kind of smile people use when they think they're untouchable. "Do that," I added lightly, "and maybe I'll marry you." I expected a reaction. A laugh. A comment. Anything. But he didn't smile. He didn't frown. He didn't even answer. He simply opened the hood. And that's when something shifted. He worked in silence, completely focused. No wasted movements. No show. His hands moved with confidence. Gentle, precise. Like the engine wasn't a machine, but something alive he respected. I found myself watching him instead of my phone. The way his brow furrowed slightly when he listened. The way he leaned in, eyes narrowing. As if the car was whispering secrets only he could hear. Minutes passed. I told myself I was impatient. That I was bored. But the truth was, I was curious. And uncomfortable. Because for the first time that day, I wasn't the most interesting thing in the moment. I cleared my throat. "I don't have all day, you know." He didn't look up. Didn't react. And somehow, that bothered me more than if he had snapped back. Then he adjusted something. Just a small movement. Stepped back. "Try now," he said. I slid into the driver's seat, suddenly nervous. I turned the key. The engine came alive instantly. Smooth. Powerful. Perfect. My heart skipped, and not because of the car. I stepped out slowly. "Oh," I said quietly. "It works." He wiped his hands with a cloth, finally looking at me properly. And when our eyes met, something inside me shifted again. There was no pride there. No smagnis. No need for approval. Just calm certainty. "Fuel sensor," he explained. "Misaligned from factory." I stared at him. "You fixed it that fast." "I build engines," he said simply. "I don't just fix them." The words stayed with me longer than they should have. I felt heat rise to my cheeks. Not embarrassment. Something else. Interest. And for the first time, I realized I didn't want him to leave. I don't know how long we stood there after the engine started. It couldn't have been more than a few seconds, but it felt stretched, like time had slowed just enough for me to notice things I usually missed. The way the sunlight hit his face when he straightened up. The quiet confidence in how he wiped his hands, not rushed, not looking for praise. The fact that he still hadn't asked my name. Most men did. Immediately. "So," I said, breaking the silence, my voice softer than before, "thank you." He nodded. "You're good to go." That was it. No flirting. No lingering. No reaction to my looks, my clothes, my car. For some reason that stung. "Wait." I blurted out before I could stop myself. He paused, turning back toward me. "Yes." I hesitated. For the first time in a long time, I didn't know which version of myself to use. The confident one, the playful one, the distant one. Just, I exhaled. You didn't even ask for payment. He shrugged. Didn't take long. That's not what I meant. I shifted my weight, suddenly very aware of how exposed I felt standing there. Not physically, emotionally. I mean, people usually charge for things they're good at. A corner of his mouth lifted, just barely. Not a smile. More like an understanding. I don't do this for money, he said. Not really. That caught me off guard. Then why do you do it? He looked past me for a moment, at the road, the sky, the quiet stretch of asphalt. Because I like fixing things that aren't supposed to fail, he said. And because sometimes showing up matters more than getting paid. Something tightened in my chest. I'd spent years surrounded by people who showed up only when it benefited them. People who dressed well, spoke loudly, smiled often, and disappeared just as easily. He was the opposite. I realized I was staring and quickly looked away, embarrassed. I'm sorry about what I said earlier, I admitted. The joke. He studied me for a second. Not harshly, not accusingly. I figured, he said. That was all. No lecture. No guilt tripping. Just acceptance. It made me want to be better, and that scared me more than any judgment would have. My name's. I stopped myself, then tried again. He waited patiently. I'm Claire, I finally said. He nodded. Nice to meet you, Claire. And you are? I asked, hopeful. Daniel. The name fit him in a way I couldn't explain. There was another pause, this one different. Warmer. Less tense. I hugged my bag closer to myself, suddenly aware of how ridiculous it must have looked next to his worn jacket and grease-stained hands. Yet he didn't look at me like I was ridiculous. He looked at me like I was human. Can I ask you something? I said. He raised an eyebrow slightly. Depends. I smiled despite myself. Why a tow truck? That finally earned a real smile. Brief. Genuine. Because people underestimate the guy who shows up when things break, he said. I like that advantage. I laughed softly, not mockingly this time but surprised. I underestimated you, I admitted. I know. There was no bitterness in it. Just truth. I took a step closer without realizing it. Close enough to smell oil and something warmer underneath. Not cologne, not artificial. Just him. You know, I said slowly. I don't usually change my mind about people. He met my gaze. And did you? I nodded. I did. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was charged. Like something fragile had just been placed between us. Something that could either shatter or grow. He glanced back at his truck. I should get going. Disappointment flickered through me before I could hide it. Oh, right. Of course. I hated how quickly I said it. He took a step away, then stopped. If you ever need help again, he said over his shoulder, call the number on the card. I hadn't noticed him hand it to me. I looked down at the small, simple card in my palm. No flashy design. No ego. Just a name. A number. And something else I couldn't explain. I watched him drive away, the tow truck disappearing down the road. My Mercedes purred beside me. But for the first time, it wasn't the thing I was thinking about. I sat in my car for a long moment before starting the engine. And when I did, I realized something quietly terrifying and beautiful at the same time. I hoped the car would break down again. I didn't call him that day. Or the next. I told myself it would look desperate. That it was just a moment. A roadside coincidence wrapped in sunlight and tension. I told myself I liked the idea of him more than the man himself. But every excuse felt thin. That night, lying in bed, I kept replaying the way he looked at me. Not through me. Not at what I wore or what I drove. At me. Like he was actually listening even when I wasn't speaking. I wasn't used to that. My phone lay face down on the nightstand. His card rested beside it. Daniel. No last name. Just the number. At 1:12 a.m., I picked up the phone. I typed a message. Deleted it. Typed again. Deleted again. Finally, I sent something simple. This is Claire. The Mercedes. 3 dots appeared almost immediately. Hey, you made it home okay? My heart jumped, embarrassingly fast. Yes, I wrote. Thanks to you. A pause. Then, good. That single word felt warmer than any flirtatious line I'd heard in years. We didn't talk long that night. Just a few messages. Small things. Safe things. But when I put my phone down, my chest felt lighter, like something had quietly settled into place. We met again 3 days later. Not because my car broke down, because I asked him if he wanted coffee. I half expected him to say no. Instead, he replied, only if it's not a 5-star place. I smiled. We met at a small cafe tucked between a laundromat and a bookstore. The kind of place I'd never noticed before. Wooden tables. Mismatched chairs. No one cared what you wore. I arrived early. He arrived exactly on time. He looked different out of his work jacket. Simpler. Softer. Still himself. Hi, I said, suddenly nervous. Hi, he replied just as quietly. We ordered. Sat across from each other. At first, the conversation moved slowly, like we were both afraid to rush something fragile. He asked about my work. I asked about his. He told me about engines, about how systems talk to each other if you know how to listen. I found myself leaning forward, fascinated, even when I didn't understand all of it. You don't get bored? I asked. He shook his head. No. I like knowing how things fit together. I hesitated, then asked, people? He smiled slightly. People are harder. I laughed. You noticed? His eyes softened. I noticed you. That made my breath catch. I looked down at my cup. You barely knew me. Sometimes you don't need to, he said. Sometimes you just feel when someone's searching. I looked up then. How did you know? I asked. Because you tried to hide it, he replied gently. Something inside me cracked. Not painfully but honestly. We talked for hours. About childhoods. About mistakes. About expectations we never agreed to but somehow carried anyway. I told him about the pressure to always look perfect. To be impressive. To be untouchable. He told me about being underestimated. About learning to stay quiet while people decided who he was without asking. At some point, our knees brushed under the table. Neither of us moved away. When we finally stood to leave, the sun was already lower in the sky. Outside, there was a moment, the kind that feels like a question. He didn't rush it. Neither did I. I had a good time, I said. Me too, he replied. We stood there, close enough to feel each other's warmth. I'm not very good at this, I admitted. He smiled, not teasing, not confident. Just real. Me neither. That was when he leaned in. Slowly. Carefully. Giving me time to stop him. I didn't. The kiss was soft. Uncertain. Perfectly imperfect. Not fireworks. Something better. Something real. When we pulled apart, my forehead rested against his. I'm glad your car broke down, he murmured. I smiled, heart full. So am I. After that kiss, nothing felt casual anymore. Not the way he texted good morning. Not the way I caught myself smiling at my phone in the middle of meetings. Not the way his name started to feel familiar in my chest, like it had always been there, and I just noticed. We didn't rush. That was his way. And slowly it became mine too. We met in small moments. Coffee before work, quiet walks in the evening, sitting in his truck with the windows down and music low, talking about nothing and everything at the same time. He never tried to impress me. And that somehow impressed me more than anything. One night, we were parked near the city overlook. Lights spread out below us like something alive and breathing. You ever feel like you're playing a role? I asked, staring out the windshield. He didn't answer right away. Every day, he said finally. I just learned when to take the mask off. I turned toward him. And when is that? When I'm with someone who doesn't need it. The silence after that was heavy, but not uncomfortable. Honest. I told him things I hadn't said out loud in years. About the pressure to be desirable. About how people loved the version of me that looked perfect but rarely asked who I actually was. I don't want to be admired, I whispered. I want to be known. He reached for my hand, thumb brushing my knuckles. Then let me know you, he said. And I did. But love doesn't come without ghosts. One afternoon, I showed up at his garage unexpectedly. I wanted to surprise him, bring lunch, see his world. The moment I stepped inside, the noise hit me. Metal. Engines. Men talking loudly. And then the looks. Not hostile. Not aggressive. Just assessing. A woman like me didn't belong there. Not in their eyes. I felt it immediately, the old instinct to straighten my posture, to become the version of myself that people accepted. He noticed. He always noticed. He wiped his hands and walked over, resting a hand gently on my back. "You okay?" he asked quietly. I nodded. "Yeah." I just didn't want to interrupt. "You're not interrupting," he said. Then louder to the room. "This is Claire. Not a friend. Not someone stopping by. Just my name. Simple. Certain." And somehow that grounded me. Later, when we were alone, I admitted, I was afraid I didn't belong. He looked at me serious. "You belong where you're wanted." Then he added softly, "And I want you here." Something about the way he said it, not possessive, not loud, made my chest ache. But love also reveals fears you didn't know you had. What if this is temporary? I asked him one night, what if I'm just a chapter in your life? He took a long breath. "Then I'll make it a chapter worth rereading," he said. "But I'm not planning on closing the book." That was the night I realized something terrifying. I was falling in love. Not with the idea of him. With the man who showed up quietly, consistently, honestly. And I knew, truly knew, that loving him meant being brave enough to stay. Even when it scared me. I didn't realize how fragile happiness could be until the first crack appeared. It wasn't dramatic. No shouting. No betrayal. Just reality knocking quietly. It started with an invitation. A gala. High profile. Elegant. The kind of event where people remembered what you wore more than what you said. I stared at the message on my phone for a long time before showing it to him. "It's important," I said carefully. "For my career." He nodded, but I saw the hesitation flicker across his face. Not jealousy. Something deeper. "Do you want me to go with you?" he asked. I hesitated. And that hesitation said more than any answer. The room felt heavier after that. "I don't know if you'd feel comfortable," I said, hating myself for how it sounded. He looked away for a moment, jaw tightening just slightly. "I'm always comfortable being myself," he replied. "I just don't know if your world is." That night, I went alone. The lights were blinding. The smiles rehearsed. Compliments floated around like currency. People asked about my dress, my hair, my car. No one asked about him. And when someone did casually, carelessly, I said, "He's a mechanic." The word landed wrong even in my own ears. I felt it immediately. The way it shrank him. The way it protected me. I went home early. I found him in his garage, engine parts laid out neatly, music playing low. He didn't look up when I entered. "I messed up," I said. He finally turned, eyes steady. "I know," he replied gently. "The question is whether you know why." I was scared, I admitted. Scared of losing everything I built. "And I was scared," he said, "that you'd lose yourself trying to keep it." The silence between us was thick with truth. "I don't want to be your secret," he added quietly. "You're not," I said quickly. "But I could be," he replied. "And that matters." I stepped closer, heart pounding. "I don't want a life where love has to hide." He studied my face, searching. "Then choose," he said. "Not me. Yourself." That night, I lay awake realizing something painful and freeing at the same time. Love wasn't the problem. Fear was. And I had a choice to make. The morning after our argument, I stood in front of my mirror longer than usual. Not adjusting my hair. Not checking my outfit. Just looking at the woman I had become. And the woman I was pretending to be. I thought about how easy it had always been to choose comfort, approval, applause, and how hard it felt to choose honesty. My phone buzzed. A reminder. Another event. Another room full of people who knew my name but not my heart. I dressed carefully, but this time, not to impress. When I arrived, the space buzzed with energy, laughter, music, flashing lights. And then I saw him, standing near the entrance, hands in his pockets, not trying to blend in, not trying to leave, just there. My breath caught. He looked at me unsure. I didn't know if you wanted me here, he said quietly when I reached him. I wasn't sure either, I admitted. But I knew I didn't want to be here without you. We walked in together. Heads turned. Whispers followed. I felt them, the glances, the assumptions. But for the first time, they didn't weigh me down. Someone asked, "Who's your guest?" I didn't hesitate. "This is Daniel," I said. "The man I love." The room didn't explode. The world didn't end. But something inside me finally settled. Later, when we stepped outside into the night air, he looked at me like he was seeing me clearly for the first time. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "I did," I replied. "For me." He reached for my hand, squeezing it gently. And in that moment, I understood something I'd never learned before. Love isn't about being admired together. It's about being brave together. After that night, nothing went back to the way it was. And that was the point. Something quiet but permanent shifted inside me. Like a door closing behind me, not trapping me, but protecting me from ever going back to who I used to be. We didn't talk about it right away. We didn't need to. The change showed itself in small, ordinary moments. In the way I stopped checking my reflection before stepping out of his truck. In the way he reached for my hand in public without hesitation. In the way silence between us stopped feeling like something to fill and started feeling like something to share. One evening, I showed up at his place unannounced. No makeup. Hair tied up. No designer bag. Just me. He opened the door surprised then smiled. "You look different," he said. "I feel different," I replied. We cooked together that night. Or tried to. I burned the vegetables. He laughed, really laughed, and took over, nudging me gently aside. "Some things take practice," he said. I watched him move around the kitchen, comfortable in his own skin, and felt something warm bloom in my chest. "I've never lived like this," I admitted. "Slow. Real." He glanced at me. "You don't have to rush anymore." Later, we sat on the floor, backs against the couch, sharing a single blanket. The city hummed softly outside the window. "Do you ever think about the future?" I asked. "All the time," he said. "I just stopped trying to control it." I rested my head on his shoulder. "I used to think love was something that happened to you," I whispered. "Now I think it's something you build." He kissed the top of my head. "That's why it lasts," he said. Weeks passed. Then months. Life tested us. Gently then sharply. Work got complicated. Schedules clashed. Old insecurities surfaced. There were nights we misunderstood each other. Days we needed space. But we always came back to the same place. Honesty. One night, I broke down. Not dramatically. Quietly. Sitting on the edge of his bed, staring at nothing. "I am scared," he confessed. "Scared that one day you'll wake up and realize I'm too much. Or not enough." He sat in front of me, took my hands. "Claire," he said softly, "I chose you. Not the version you show the world. The real one." Tears slipped down my cheeks. "I don't want to lose this," I said. "You won't," he replied. "Not if we protect it together." That was the night I understood something deeply. Love wasn't about grand gestures. It was about staying. About choosing each other even when it was inconvenient. Even when it was uncomfortable. Even when it was hard. And I chose him. Every day. Time moved differently with him. Days didn't rush past anymore. They unfolded. Slowly. Honestly. Like they weren't trying to escape. I started leaving things at his place without noticing. A toothbrush. A sweater. A book I pretended I'd come back for. But really, I just like seeing my life blend into his. He never commented on it. He never needed to. One morning, I woke up before him. The light was soft, barely touching the room. I watched him sleep, the steady rise and fall of his chest, the calm on his face that came from a life lived without pretending. And for the first time in my life, I felt safe. Not protected. Not rescued. Safe because I was seen. Later that day, we drove together, nowhere special. Just errands. Music low. Windows open. At a red light, I caught my reflection in the mirror. No pink hair today. No perfect outfit. Just me. And I liked her. You're quiet, he said. I'm thinking, I replied. Dangerous. I smiled. Maybe. I was wondering when I stopped feeling like I had to perform. He glanced at me. Probably when you realized you didn't have an audience. That stayed with me. That night, we talked about things I'd avoided for years. Marriage. Children. What it meant to build something that didn't impress anyone else. I don't want a life that looks good from the outside, I said. I want one that feels right when no one's watching. He nodded slowly. Then we're aligned. There was no dramatic declaration. No promise wrapped in perfection. Just alignment. And that felt bigger than any fantasy. A few weeks later, I ran into someone from my old life. She looked at me, really looked, and frowned. You seem different, she said. Happier but quieter. I smiled. I stopped trying to be loud. When I told Daniel about it later, he squeezed my hand. You don't need to be loud to be strong, he said. That night, we sat on the hood of my Mercedes. The same one that had brought us together, watching the sky darken. I used to think this car defined me, I admitted. Now it just feels like a thing. He chuckled. Machines are meant to get you places, not tell you who you are. I leaned into him. And you? I asked. What do you think defines you? He thought for a moment. Who I show up for, he said. I closed my eyes. Because I knew the answer. Me. And for the first time in my life, love didn't feel like something I had to earn. It felt like something I was allowed to keep. Moving in together didn't happen with fireworks. It happened with a conversation over takeout, boxes stacked awkwardly in the corner, and a quiet understanding that neither of us wanted to keep splitting our lives in half. I don't want to rush you, he said. I don't want to wait just because I'm afraid, I answered. So we chose the middle ground. The honest one. The first weeks were messy in the most human way. My routines clashed with his. I woke up earlier. He stayed up later. I learned that he needed silence in the morning. He learned that I talked when I was nervous, which was more often than I admitted. We argued once about something stupid. Laundry. Of all things. I stood in the hallway, arms crossed, ready to defend myself like it mattered. Then he laughed. Not at me. At the moment. And suddenly I laughed too. That's when I realized. This wasn't fragile. It was flexible. One night, while unpacking old boxes, I found pieces of myself I'd forgotten. High heels I never wore anymore. Dresses bought for rooms I no longer entered. Photos of a woman who smiled constantly, but rarely rested. He picked one up gently. Is that you? He asked. Yes, I said. But not anymore. He nodded. She got you here. That kindness, toward my past, loosened something in me. I didn't have to erase who I was. I could grow. The world didn't stop testing us. There were looks when we walked into certain places. Comments masked as jokes. Moments when I saw him brace himself before entering my old circles. And there were moments when I felt the pull of comfort, of being admired instead of understood. But every time I questioned myself, I came back to one truth. With him, I didn't have to disappear to be loved. One evening, I asked him something I'd been carrying for a while. Do you ever resent me? I asked softly. For the things I didn't see at first? He took a long breath. No, he said. Because you learned. And because you stayed. I rested my head against his chest. That matters to me more than being right. Outside, the city moved on like it always did. Inside, something settled into place. Not perfection. Commitment. And that felt stronger than anything I'd ever worn. I didn't know it was coming. That was the strange part. We were standing where everything had begun. The same quiet roadside overlooked just outside the city, where lights blurred into gold at sunset, and the air smelled like warm asphalt and summer wind. He had suggested the drive casually. No build-up. No nervous energy I could read. I was talking, probably too much, about nothing important at all when he pulled over and cut the engine. Come here, he said softly. I turned toward him. And then I noticed his hands. Not shaking, just careful. Intentional. He stepped out of the car, walked around, and opened my door like it was the most natural thing in the world. When I stood beside him, the wind lifted my hair, and for a second I felt that old version of myself try to step forward. The woman who expected spectacle. But he didn't give me spectacle. He gave me truth. I've rebuilt engines that cost more than houses, he said quietly. I've designed systems that people depend their lives on. And I've learned that the strongest things aren't loud. He looked at me then, really looked at me. When I'm with you, I don't feel like I have to prove anything, he continued. I feel home. My chest tightened. I don't want perfection, he said. I don't want easy. I want real. I want mornings and arguments and laughter that surprises us both. Then he reached into his pocket. No dramatic pause. No crowd. Just us. He dropped to one knee anyway. I choose you, he said. Every version of you. Will you choose me for the rest of this life? For a moment, the world went quiet. And then I was crying and laughing at the same time, nodding so hard it felt ridiculous. Yes, I whispered. Yes. He stood, pulled me into his arms and kissed me, not rushed, not showy, just deep, steady, sure. A kiss that felt like an answer. Like arrival. The city lights flickered behind us. The car cooled beside us. Somewhere far away, engines hummed and lives moved forward. But right there, in that moment, I knew something I had never known before. Love wasn't about who fixes who. It was about two people choosing to stand still together and build forward. And this time, I wasn't driving away.